Welcome. Sergio here with another story chat. Happy April 22nd. It's Earth Day. So I hope you guys are doing well. I want to talk about a couple of things here, and I'm also going to take your questions. So anything that's on your mind, might as well just let me know, because I wanted to chat about how to get into kind of some study techniques. That's kind of the topic I want to be chatting about today. And then, yeah, anything else that comes up, we'll hit that. There were some great questions that came up last time, so that's super cool. We talked about story resources last time, and I think most of you guys responded with that you really like that. So that's great. Some people even were expecting that. They were hoping for some kind of resource like that. That's super cool. I think in the same respect, in the same lines with that kind of talking about story resources, how to get better, how to improve, I did want to chat about some of the ways that you actually should study. Just some recommendations, because it occurred to me that if you're coming at this and you haven't done it before, then you might get a little bit lost and overwhelmed by the amount of material that's out there, or even just the difficulty that comes with boarding out a sequence, right? And you don't find out how difficult it is till you actually sit down and do it, right? Somebody gives you an assignment, they give you a scene, or they might, you might get a client, you might board out a commercial, and you say, oh yeah, that's easy, I can do a couple keyframes here and there. But you actually sit down and you start doing this stuff, what ends up happening in most of the time is you just have these really conservative shots with very similar camera angles, and then what happens is that you turn in a kind of a sequence that is just, it's not very risky, it's not very conservative, you're not pushing the camera angles. So what to do to get around that stuff is figuring out a way that you can study the materials that we have, or anybody else that has out there, and be able to digest that and apply that to your own material. So I want to talk a little bit about that. And then any other questions that come up, just post them, and then we'll hit them one by one. We're going to go for about half an hour in these chats, which is really fun to connect with you guys. And then we're going to answer as many questions as we can that come up. All right, great. It's great to see people. Hey, Charlie, big shout out to you. And Jose, welcome back. It's nice to see you guys. I hope you guys are all doing well. There's a big community that has built up with storyboard art and just the visual storytellers in general. And I really like that, because I feel like there's a network out there. I can ask some questions and get some answers from people, and other people do that as well. So that's really great to be able to lean on some people and feel like you have somebody that has your back and might give you job recommendations, or basically just somebody you can also bounce off ideas, right? So that's pretty cool. A little sip of water. Okay, so let me get into some of the goodness that I'm talking about here with how to prepare for studying your materials. Okay, so let's say you get a course, whatever course it is, either it's in person, which is at the very moment, most people are doing online stuff because you can't go out that much, or you don't want to. You want to avoid, personal contact with the COVID-19 thing. So let's say you take an online class, right? Most of the time, they follow very similar formats. So they're presenting lesson information, and it's either in video form and written form. You might have interaction with the actual teacher, where it's kind of like this, a live stream one-on-one video conference, and there's a bit of listening, and then there's hopefully a bit of action where you actually have to do something. So the way that the stuff that we have at Storyboard Art is, let me just explain a little bit how we have that structured. There's a lot of video lessons that we do that present material. So we give you guys some of the principles, some of the concepts that you want to understand before you actually tackle the assignment. And then most of the time we give an assignment, and we have you apply those principles that we've been talking about in the lesson, and hopefully you can apply that to the assignment. Now, again, any platform, they might have different setups. The best way to do this, obviously, is to give it a try, and then get some feedback from the instructor or some kind of mentor who's going to help you, right? And so it's pretty obvious that what you want to do is listen, watch the lesson, listen to it, And you can even do that a couple of times. So I know people who, and it's great the way that we have this digital environment set up, because you can listen to this stuff on your phone, you can put on headphones on your iPad, and you can go to a cafe or something and just have that playing in the background. You can even be doing some sketches as you're watching the material, right? So you're taking in the lesson because it's not necessarily live. Let's assume it's a recorded lesson. Then what you want to do with the assignment is a couple of things. You want to sit down and isolate yourself so you have some concentrated focus time, because it doesn't make sense if you're going to attack something and then you're trying to multitask and do many things at once, especially when you're learning something new. So I always give the example, this is one of the ones I do, is like, you remember when you first learned how to drive, okay? You drive a car and the radio is off, you're like completely focused, there's two hands on the wheel, and you might have somebody in the passenger seat giving you some directions and like really coaching you, but you're like concentrated, okay? And then every movement in the car, you're looking, turn signal, right? You might even do hand signals, whatever you got to do to control that vehicle, because you're not used to it, right? You go slowly, you brake, all of a sudden, and it's not very fluid. Okay, so that's kind of like, imagine that's how you're going to start when you're doing a new lesson or something new. You have to have that focused concentration. Now think about how you drive now. Most of the people that have their license, if you drive, right? Let's assume that most of you guys have done this before. To me, I always think it's incredible that the world over, right? We got like billions of people know how to drive, and it's such a complicated thing, but we can do it because you're moving at high velocity in this vehicle, but you're physically able as a human being to do many multiple things at once and control it in a very easy way. So think about how you drive now. Like, I drive with one hand on the wheel. I have to be worried about anybody. I can have the radio on. I'm like grooving. Like, I have complete control of my environment in the car, and I'm still looking about things. I don't want to crash and go crazy. But you know how you have that confidence when it comes to mastering that skill of driving. It's such a complex thing. You think about it, there's brakes, steering wheel, there's like dials going everywhere, and it's a really it's a really involved thing. Same thing goes with drawing or visual storytelling or any kind of lesson. You do this and you have to at first start out slow and go really concentrated about what you're doing. So you take in that lesson, isolate yourself, make sure that you just give yourself that time. So maybe you take a break from whatever you're doing. Let's say you have some family time or something. You take like a half-hour break so that nobody's going to bug you. You close the door, whatever you got to do. And then you're going through that lesson and you're doing some assignments, because you really need to be thinking at that time. You need to be turning your brain on and understanding what thoughts and decisions you're going to make, and whether those thoughts and decisions are correct or not based on the material that you're working with. And the reason you need to do that is so you can go back and judge whether you made the right decision or whether you have to correct it, okay? And this is something that is like trial and error when it comes to doing visual storytelling and doing a sequence. So for example, in the visual story course, that's something that we've been talking about for like the last couple weeks. And basically, free online course, you can do that with us, and we give you the assignments. When you do that, though, you want to sit down and actually plan it out. Now, a lot of people have given some comments that it's really intensive, and you actually find out how difficult it really is, especially when you get more involved with more technique stuff, because you're dealing with multiple things. You're dealing with the techniques in the program, how you're like setting up your brushes and all the menus and that kind of thing, depending on what kind of software you're using, and then the material that you're trying to elaborate on and create a visual story for. So that in and of itself is like, you need to have a mastery of the technique before you can actually sit down and elaborate on the actual content of the material. So you see how difficult and layered this is? That's why I want you to have some isolated time when you're doing this. So even if you have, let's say, half an hour, my example here, at first, the next thing you want to do is repeat that. Now, it could be twice a week, 3 times a week. If you can do it every day, great. But then the idea is that you keep consistent with building up your stuff, and eventually, after a while, you're going to have enough to have a full sequence. Okay, and that sequence is something that you want to turn in, and hopefully, you can get some feedback from your mentors. So another thing I wanted to mention, this is a key point here, is that you want to show this stuff. It's really important, whatever kind of online environment you're in or classroom environment. The whole point is that you're trying to learn from those who have come before you, that you assume you have somebody who has experience and done that stuff. Like, I've been on many different productions, and I've been, decades in the industry, and like I've burned the midnight oil many times trying to get things done. and I've learned from my mistakes, and I've had other people show me. I've been mentored many, many times by people, and that's how I'm able to build up and get the confidence to do the things I'm doing now, because many people have showed me the path. Okay, this is what we want to do and show you guys how to do it. But it's all about the learning process, right? This is kind of what I want to focus on, is understanding how you get into that mindset to learn, because you sit down with something new, you're going to get overwhelmed and you're just going to throw it away, and you think, ah, man, this is either not important, or I can't do it, or I don't want to do it. You don't want to put in the effort. And the real reason you should be doing this stuff is, one, that you enjoy it, and that you can actually see the progress. Okay, so you have your sequence, you want to turn that into an instructor, a mentor, somebody online. And this is where the Facebook United visual storytelling group that we have, you can turn that in there and get some feedback from people. People are so generous. The work there is so awesome. The recent stuff is great. There's some really, really nice examples, and we can all learn from both the technique that people have and also just the creativity that they're working from. So hopefully you can get inspired, and then you get some feedback. So people are going to hit you up. We have our community mentors on there. I'm looking at stuff as well, and then you go and you correct it. So that's the next stage, is you take that feedback, and hopefully it's very focused and specific to what you need to be doing, and you go back and you correct it and you improve it the next time. That's how you learn, right? In a real job environment, that's what you would be doing. You do one pass, you turn that in, you get feedback, and this is where you have to be a really good student, because you got to take a bunch of notes in the work environment from your director, from your producer, from whoever is involved in supervising that particular sequence or that particular show, feature, TV, whatever, and or video games, right? Then you go back and you correct it, you do it again. So there's multiple passes and multiple iterations, and hopefully you're building up on that, and everybody is giving you good quality feedback in that type of environment, right? With that, you can grow, and then the next time you do it, it's going to get easier and it's going to get faster. So this is where the confidence comes in, and this is where your skills will improve, and you have better stuff to show in your portfolio. That's the whole idea. Okay, so let me know if you have any comments on that. And let me jump into some of the questions. I saw you guys post some of this. So great, this is awesome. So Vicho Freddy, I hope I'm pronouncing that right. So quick question, do you always do your streams at the same hour? Because this is the first time I'm able to catch you live. All right, friend, thank you for that. We're trying to do this. I'm trying to do this towards the end of my workday at 7 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. So if you can catch me there, and I'm trying to do these multiple times a week on Monday, Wednesday, and Friday. So thanks for that question. And sometimes with my schedule, it doesn't allow it. We did post earlier in the day that we were going to do this. So I'm happy you made it to this chat. The other thing is, these things are recorded, and we repost it on our YouTube channel. We publish it to social media as well. So if you missed the live feed, you can get the replay on YouTube, LinkedIn, Facebook, and even Instagram for the story section. So check us out there. And also give us your questions. So if you don't get your question answered right away, we're happy to take it, and just maybe the next time we'll get that going. Cool. So Beth Bristow, how are you? Good to see you. Let me answer your question here. She's saying, when you mentioned study films in the study reference video, because I mentioned this before, exactly how does one do that? Great question. She's saying here, I get too wrapped up into just watching the film and the story. I don't understand how to study it or pick it apart. Okay, here's my method. I'm going to give you a couple of tips here. So the basic questions to sum up is how you study from film and from movies. There's a couple ways that I do this. One, especially if it's a new movie, I'll usually just sit down, watch the film, and enjoy it. So that's like, let's say, hour and a half or 2 hours of your time. And I usually just like to have that experience and go through the film, right? It's great with like Netflix and stuff, because you can put this on your list or your feed for whatever movie you liked, and you can go back and you can watch it again. So then the next time I watch it, I'm gonna actually sit there, but with like a sketchbook in hand or some kind of note paper, and I'm gonna sit there with the remote control and start pausing this. Okay, so the first time I watch the movie all the way through, right? So you can get to enjoy it. You have the emotional ride, and you also you get the surprises for the first time in your film, right? The reveals. The next type, you already know what's happening. You already know what's going on. So this is where how you do this when you study a film. Like I just rewatched Hail Caesar, the Coen Brothers film that's on Netflix. That film is excellent. I really, really love that film. I think it's a little bit underrated. I'm so surprised that it didn't do better at the box office. But fantastic movie, highly recommended. Coen Brothers, amazing. Um, so what you want to do is you watch that film again and you start pausing it on things that you find key. So a couple of things you can do is you can do a story breakdown. This is actually really important when it comes to structure and understanding, just like literally just pause the film when you see key moments. So you might see things like the inciting incident of the film, which is what sets the story in motion. And you could also do the setup of each character. You could identify subplots. You can also identify the climax, the protagonist and antagonist. So these are elements of story structure that you can definitely identify pretty easily in most any film. Sometimes it's actually tricky to identify the catalyst or the inciting incident because it can be buried within a couple of other things. You know, films that are like action movies and stuff like that, you can pretty much pinpoint those quickly. Like for example, Hail Caesar, which I just mentioned, which is on my mind. The inciting incident is when they kidnap George Clooney's character. So that's because that's really what sets the story in motion and everything else going on. So there's many ways you can identify this. The other thing to do when you're studying movies and film is to actually pause and study the compositions. So you freeze frame it and do a sketch of the compositions that you really like. And in any one film, if you pause it like 10 to 20 times, you're going to find at least that many really nice compositions. Even the ones, what I like to pause sometimes are just dialogue scenes and just with characters talking. And I want to see what kind of composition and what the camera is doing. Sometimes the camera is actually tilted just ever so slightly. And you don't notice the first time through unless you pause it and you actually see that. Yeah, they might have interesting ways that they're framing the characters, one really close to the camera, the other one further apart to give you some depth, even in a dialogue scene. So that's something that you want to identify. The same thing goes with staging, is understanding how the characters and choreography of the scene are working. So how characters move around in the shot and also move around in the scene. That's also a really, really fun way to study film. So yeah, there's many ways. And I would recommend picking your top 10 favorite movies or finding like the top 10 movies that you like on Netflix, for example, or Amazon Video, any kind of streaming service, or in your DVD collection, whatever it is, and then just rewatch it and make sure that, yeah, again, you can pause it and freeze frame stuff. That's really a way to do it. A good way to do it. Okay, great question. Cool. Let me see who else is chatting. Great to see everybody on here. This is so awesome. Big shout out to all you guys who have been following us for a while. So Charlie here is saying, any recent movies you recently watched that you've loved and that we should check out? Yeah, I've been recommending a couple on Netflix for a while. I just mentioned Coen Brothers, so there's another one, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. That's a recent one that they did. I don't know if it's the very latest that they made, but man, those guys are just the most just amazing filmmakers. I find their stuff is so deep and so interesting, so unique. Their dialogue is really, really cool just to listen to and how it's all structured. I'm a big fan of the Coen Brothers, but the Ballad of Buster Scruggs I found is a really fun movie, and some of the stories there are just so deep and like they hit home. It's really cool. I really enjoy that movie. I just mentioned Hail Caesar. That's another Coen Brothers film. One I saw recently as well on Netflix is Highwaymen with I can't remember who it's directed by. He is somebody famous or well known, but it is with Kevin Costner and Woody Harrelson, and it's the story of the sheriffs who caught Bonnie and Clyde back in the 40s, I believe it was. And that's a really excellent drama. It's so well paced. It's a little bit slow, but I found it really well paced. And that's something to watch for cinematography, just wonderful acting, and I thought is just really, really cool. Yeah, so check those out. And let me think anything else off the top of my head. On Netflix, again, a couple of ones that I just had on my feed was Once Upon a Time in the West. And that's an amazing film to watch for composition and just learning stuff. It's beautiful, beautiful film. It's very stylized. And I think you get a kick at it if you haven't seen westerns and just that take, that old school take on spaghetti western from another great Sergio Leone, film director. Okay, cool. Um, yeah, big shout out here to Wahab, who's one of our contributors, and he had a really great email on what to do and what films to study for storyboard art. So if you follow us, if you don't follow us, sign up to Storyboard Art. It's free, and you get our email newsletter, and you're on our list. So we constantly give out info about the industry and what to do, how to study, what things are cool, what kind of resources, and anything that drops from Storyboard Art, you guys would be the first to know. Cool. All right. And actually, let me know what films you're into and what you've seen recently that you thought was good, because I'm always looking for good films to watch. Yeah. Cool. All right. Another question from Vicho here. Do you think it also helps to write the time a specific event happened, like the inciting incident, or would that be more directed to screenwriting than storyboarding? No, man, I think that's a really great question. So he's talking about, let's say you're watching a film and like 15 minutes in, you see the inciting incident. That's a really good marker. It's really nice when you're talking about story structure to understand when things happen, because that's how they've structured the film. They structure the story in a certain way. Okay, and then what you want to do there is, it's just kind of as an exercise to understand when things hit. So when the climax hits, when Act One begins, or sorry, Act Two begins, Act Three begins. Certainly, when Act One begins is when the movie starts, right? Most of the time, unless there's some kind of prologue, and then you can find either generalities and commonalities with films, or you can also find some things that they've changed it, and like the inciting incident doesn't necessarily start where you think it is. So a movie like Pulp Fiction, which does a time shifting, is like identify where the inciting incident happens in that film. It's a little more a little more layered. In fact, you're probably looking for the inciting incident in each one of those subplots, because there's a main thread and then there's like multiple under threads or subplots that are going on there. So yeah, I would do that as well, is to note the time. And this is going to help you. How does this help you? So you're saying, okay, yes, that does relate to screenwriting, but how this helps is when you're doing your own stories and you're coming up with your own sequences, is to know when the beats and the action moments and the pacing is right. Because you just as an artist and as a viewer, you tend to like films more than others depending on the way you react to them. So sometimes you like fast-paced movies for a specific reason, and like I said, for Highwaymen, for example, which is really kind of drawn-out drama, the pacing is really long. So those beats between Act One, Two, Three, and any subplots in there might be really extended, and then you want to be able to understand that and manipulate that in your own story. So that's a really good way to do it. Cool. All right, this is great. I love that. Let's see here. Let me answer this question from Melly Illustration. If you're coming up with your own scene for a portfolio piece, how do you go about planning what you will do before heading into the boards? This is a really good question. It's a common thing that happens a lot. So in doing your own stuff for your portfolio, one, you want to understand what you're trying to get across in your portfolio. The first thing you should probably do is note what kind of gaps or what things you really need to fill to show a potential employer or a studio that you want to show in your portfolio. So if you don't have an action scene, for example, and you're going to apply to an action TV show or an action series, you definitely want to make sure you have a sample of that. And so you want to sit down with that subject in mind and create an action sequence. The same thing goes for if everything is action in portfolio, but you want to show them that you can handle drama and dialogue, then you want to have a dialogue scene and understand how to do that with some cool staging and some really good camera angles and make it really visually interesting, because that's what you're going to be doing, is creating the visuals as a story artist. And then so you want to sit down with that in mind. And then also in your portfolio, know if you're trying to replace a sequence, how long it's going to be. So you don't necessarily have to do a full elaborate story. you can if you want to, but most of the time, all you need is like, I don't know, maybe a couple hundred boards, which would fill about 2 to 3 pages. And then from that, you can edit that down so it looks good visually on the page. And it's a really selective choice of what you put in your portfolio, because people flip through portfolios super fast. They're just like, they go through it, they scan it. Okay, does this work? I like that drawing. Okay, well, there's some screen direction issues here. This perspective is a little off. Yeah, I don't know. And that's it. And they put it down. So it's just, that's how quickly studios and art directors and stuff will go through these portfolios. The other thing is just like, how do you come up with these ideas? If that's kind of where you're taking this question, is there it's like the sky's the limit. You can take scripts that you download or you find on the internet and just do 1 or 2 pages. To do 1 or 2 pages of a script is really hard. It's really elaborate. It's going to take you a long time if you do it well with continuity boards fleshing out each shot. So especially if it's an action scene, 1 page could really take you 2 to 3 weeks of intense drawing to actually get that off. And so that's one thing that you could do. The other thing is just come up with ideas and concepts, like a story idea. And this, like, document your day. So when you wake up in the morning, did you have a fight with your toothpaste? Like, did it fall down? Did your toothbrush, spill into the sink and you had to clean things up? Like, there's a story right there. So really, life is what you can do, and how you show people that story is really interesting. When you cook breakfast, did you have a battle with the with finding ingredients, or like the oven didn't work and you gotta improvise? Whatever happens, right? You cut your finger by accident, oh man, and then it really hurts. You got to go get a Band-Aid or something, right? Create some conflict. That's how you do this to show visually what's going on in your life. So as far as idea generation for something you want to put in your portfolio, the sky's the limit there, and you can go to town. Cool, this is great. There's some really good film suggestions here. So Animation Diva is saying Ford versus Ferrari. That's cool. I saw that. I want to check that out. Let's see. Charlie's saying that he loved Roma and Parasite. Cool. I haven't seen Parasite yet, and I want to check both of those out. So that's great. And there's also a black and white version of Parasite out there. Interesting. Okay, cool. I'll check that out as well. Don't just study the modern stuff as well. One other recommendation is to get the classics and look and see if you have some classics there in your film library or on Netflix or Amazon, and go back and see like things that have won awards, won Oscars, maybe famous actors. Like if you go back and research people you like Robert De Niro or something, and see the films that he's been in. Most of the time he does really good work, and the films that he's in are pretty good. So those are things to study. Directors that you like, and if you're new to this whole game and coming into visual storytelling and you don't really have a list of directors that you like, well, pick some of the genres that you like. Do you like action movies? Do you like kung fu movies? And then go back and see where these things originated from. There's a whole bunch of like Shaw Brothers films on Netflix right now. And if you don't know the history of the Shaw Studio, they were like leading guys in the Hong Kong kung fu industry, and this is why we have like the Matrix action kung fu stuff. Jet Li and Bruce Lee and everything evolved from where those guys came from. And then now any kind of modern movie like what's the one I was going to mention was, well, even the Fast and the Furious, like any kind of action that happens in there, it's always going to be referenced from previous stuff that happened before. So it's good to see where that came from, and you can get a kick out of these things. Like not everything, like back in the 70s and 60s, they did these weird zooms with zooming into their characters, and you can bring that back and use that in your own films, and that's where style comes up. Quentin Tarantino uses that a lot. He's really been inspired by a lot of like Western influences and classic films, and also Hong Kong cinema. So there's it's cool to go back and look at genres and then study those things. All right, guys, I think that is. Wahab is also posting. This is great, buddy. Thanks for that. Crackle is a streaming service that's free, and so check out Crackle. I think it's crackle.com, or just do a search and figure out how to get that. And then they have some classics on there that you can stream and watch those for free. So this is great stuff to do on the downtime for this like coronavirus meltdown, that you can actually be at home, got a good internet connection, and watch these things and study. and keep drawing. So it's, don't just watch a movie and just be inactive. You want to be proactive, have a sketchbook in hand, and also be doing some sketches and some drawings as you're studying. Okay, and then you can get like it's almost like 2 for 1 because you're practicing your hand-eye coordination, your pencil mileage. You might get a cool portfolio piece or a nice composition out of that, and then you're also watching and studying movies. Cool. Well, let me answer this one last question, and then we'll sign off for today. So Melly in illustration here asks, when coming up with your own story, do you ever write out a screenplay of that story before going into boards? That's a good question. If it's a screenplay, I usually that means it's longer form, and I'm probably working with a group of people, and then I need to show them a script and screenplay format to do that. If it's my own project, what I will probably do is write out story beats and not have to elaborate unless there's some specific dialogue things I want in there. I'll just do the story beats and I'll just start boarding based on those beats. So you could have beats would be like wide shot, character comes into the scene, cars enter from screen left, the building in the background blows up, characters come running out, the helicopters come in, whatever story it is that you're doing. And you just write that beat after beat after beat, which basically is a shot list for what you want to do. And so you don't actually have to sit down and write a full script and, exterior opening shot with the explosion blowing up and then the dialogue. That's an exercise in and of itself. Actually, it's kind of fun to write scripts and write that in your script format. But when it comes to actually just doing your assignment, sometimes I'll just do a shot list, and then you get by from there. All right, friends, thanks for joining and chatting with us today, and I hope some of this was helpful. So check us out on Storyboard Art and also some of our social media, and let us know what you're watching and what things are helping, and we'll pass those tips on to everybody else so we can all learn together. All right, good luck with your stuff. Stay safe out there, and we'll talk soon. See you guys.